Welcome back to Paul's Hardware, everyone. It is with a heavy heart and a fair amount of loathing and regret that I am bringing back this series, which I've not had to do since 2022. This is the GPU price watch for 2025. We're starting off in March to get ourselves a baseline of the prices that are actually being charged for the GPUs that you might want to purchase for a gaming PC on the market, because as someone who makes videos about building gaming PCs and recommending hardware, my advice for new builders right now is don't build a new PC because the GPU prices are so absurdly ridiculous. So in this series, which I'm going to keep going on a monthly basis for as long as is necessary, we'll take a look at pricing and how it changes over time. Hopefully we're going to be witnessing a downward trend, but at the very least this should give you some fuel to continue your hatred towards NVIDIA and their pricing schemes. But I think if there's one thing I've realized as I've gathered this data today, is that we should really be directing our fire hoses of hatred and bitterness towards AMD as well.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. Okay, so I'd like to dive right into the data, but first, where did that data come from? It was sourced from PC Part Picker, and I'm looking at US pricing. So for each graphics card, whether we're talking about the RTX 5070, 5090, or an AMD Radeon 9070 or 9070 XT, I'm simply sorting by price, grabbing the lowest price option that's available, and then I'm also averaging the 10 lowest prices listed, or fewer than that if there are fewer cards available. And that is how I got the data to fill out this chart right here, which lists the MSRP, the average price for March, the lowest price for March, and then the price difference versus MSRP, both as a dollar value and a percentage. Now, an important thing to note when you're looking at GPU pricing, particularly with Amazon, but other sites have third-party sellers as well, is that if a price seems too good to be true, or if it seems to be a significant discount versus everything else, like the cheapest RTX 5080, which is $1,250 versus the other ones, which are $1,400 plus, well, that might be a false listing. So if we go to the actual listing on Amazon and we look at all of the buying options, we can see that far and away the cheapest is this $1,250 listing from Filling Store, is a brand new third-party marketplace seller, and I can pretty much guarantee that if you actually ordered this card from them, they would not fulfill the order. It would be canceled, and they're either trying to scrape up your personal information, or sometimes they try to drop ship like the wrong item to you and then be like, oh, we shipped you that $1,300 graphics card, right? You don't get a refund. For the lowest prices listed here, I did double check that, and if there is a low price listed, it should be from a reseller who at least has some selling history and a feedback rating of at least 85% or better. So starting off at the top with the RTX 4060 8GB, and do note that I'm mostly looking at current generation and last generation cards. So we have the RTX 40 series and the more recent RTX 50 series, and part of the reason people are mad at NVIDIA right now is because they stopped production of these 40 series GPUs several months ago, switched over production to the RTX 50 series, but it seems like they didn't really make sure that there was enough inventory to fulfill demand before making that switch over, and they seem to not really mind at all that all their GPUs are going for scalper prices right now, because NVIDIA and AMD for that matter are a lot more focused on the AI market and all the money that they're making there, and so the feelings of gamers doesn't really matter much to them. The only thing that's going to affect these prices long term is actual market forces, supply and demand, which is another part of the reason I'm making this video, is to encourage people not to buy for these marked up prices. If everyone does that and people stop buying GPUs, the prices will start to drop, and that is really hopefully the longer term goal of this series. On the right side though, you can see that all these values are in red because all the GPUs I'm looking at today, with one exception, are currently priced higher than MSRP, even though a lot of these cards launched 1 or 2+ years ago. The 4060 and 4060 Ti were never favorites of reviewers. They offered very poor performance for the prices they were charging from the get-go, and unfortunately things haven't improved that much. We're at a $52 markup, or 17.3% over MSRP for a 4060 8GB, and a painful $150 markup at 37.5% over MSRP for the 4060 Ti 8GB, and I did lump the 8GB and 16GB values together, so if you do decide to buy a 4060 Ti, which you shouldn't. Don't buy for these prices, but look for the 16 gig model because there was one in there for $580 or $590, but don't do that. The RTX 4070 and 4070 Super at $500 and $600 respectively were kind of in that middle range for NVIDIA where you didn't have to spend $1,000 or so and the price to performance wasn't fantastic, but it was a bit better than you got with the 4060. But right now that doesn't count because we're looking at a $280 markup for either of these cards. It's about 48.2% over MSRP for the 4070 Super and 56% over for the 4070. Things don't improve much for the 4070 Ti Super, which should be $800. Those are going for $1,300 at the cheapest, just a $500 markup or 62.5% over MSRP. The 4080 Super is likewise just dumb at about $1,700 for the cheapest one on the market. These should cost $1,000 or less by this point, but $695 or 69.5% markup. And then the 4090 24 gig is even more ridiculous, second only to the 5090 in terms of added price for scalpers, plus $1,275 over MSRP or about an 80% markup. And again, that GPU launched 2 years ago. Of course, what we would really like to see is the new cards, the 50 series, actually come down in price because a 5070 at $550, even a 5070 Ti at $750 would not be too difficult to recommend right now, bearing in mind that that's only the case because we have been beaten down so severely by these horrible GPU prices. It would seem as though the 5070 has somewhat normalized at a $700 MSRP, which is $150 more than what NVIDIA said it would be. This is an actual 2-slot card and it's available from, oh man, Filling Store. That wasn't supposed to be, wait. See, this is why I didn't make this into graphics. It's so I could change things on the fly. Right, so it's entirely possible that NVIDIA just thinks like, oh, $700 as the MSRP for a 5070. That's just kind of where we wanted it to land. But I still find that to be pretty offensive since we were pitched a $550 starting price for this. So a $149 or 27.1% markup is dumb and nobody buy it. For the 5070 Ti, it would also seem like an $800 price is what things are settling down to, which would be only a $50 markup over MSRP, which still not the greatest, but would be among the best options from what we're looking at today. But again, we got a reality check because if we look over here, we can see that that price is coming from Filling Store. Oh look, they have one even cheaper. They're aggressively trying to steal people's personal information by double listing this for $799 and $789. Of course, we know that that is BS. The actual lowest price I was able to find from a seller who's actually selling it was $970, a $220 markup, 29.3% over MSRP. And our last two GPUs, the $1,000 5080 can only be found for $1,500, which is at least a nice evenly rounded markup of 50%. And then the 5090 32 gig is selling for double MSRP, a 100% markup to $4,000. So, you know, a 5090, it's so good, it should cost double. Another thing to note is with this average price column here, you might notice that there's a pretty significant bump up from the lowest price option, but that is another knock-on effect of the limited supply right now, is that the GPUs that they are trying to move more quickly, they might price slightly more aggressively, but that means if you want the best price, you're really limited to maybe 1 or 2 models. And now here are the AMD Radeon GPU options as well. We do have a little bit of green here, but don't get excited because that's for the 7900 XT, which has had a really bad MSRP from the start at $900. So technically that shouldn't count, and do note that that's just the lowest price for $894, and the average price is still over $1,000. Also note that I'm only including higher end cards in this listing, and that's for a couple reasons. One is that AMD's recent launches, the 9070 and 9070 XT, I see as very desirable cards at their MSRPs. If these cards were available for their MSRP, they would be easy recommendations right now, especially if you compared them to everything that's available from the NVIDIA side and those current prices. But I mentioned that we should be giving AMD a hard time right now too, because they haven't exactly been flooding the market with cheap GPUs to offer an alternative to NVIDIA's short supply situation. And in fact, it would seem that AMD has also cut way back on the number of GPUs that they are producing. Just like NVIDIA, AMD books a certain amount of capacity with the fabs who produce their GPUs, and then it's up to AMD to choose which of the various GPU designs they have to actually produce. And it seems like AMD must also be heavily prioritizing the production of their AI GPUs, because if we look at their top 3 7000 series cards, the GRE, the XT, and the XTX 7900s, they are really, really hard to find. In particular, the 7900 GRE is just non-existent, and that's supposed to be their relatively well-priced option in this range. And while I didn't go all the way down the 7000 series stack, that seems to also apply to lower end cards right now, like the 7700 XT. But the 7800 XT, which has a 16 gig frame buffer and supposedly a $500 MSRP, has been the most viable new GPU to buy option recently, but that was that much closer to its MSRP. As of today, it's a $70 markup, or about 14%, so it still stands as potentially the best option among these cards, but again, you would be overpaying for a card that came out a couple years ago that is not capable of taking advantage of all the RDNA 4 features that just came out with the 9070s, so I would still say hold off on a 7800 XT purchase and wait for hopefully more inventory to come in for the 9070 and 9070 XT and those prices to drop. 7900 XT at $894 is the only GPU on this list that is currently available for less than its MSRP, but that's because its MSRP was really dumb. It was priced way too close to the 7900 XTX, and the 7900 XT has been available for the low to mid $700 range, so this to me is still a markup. 7900 XTX plus $400 or 40% markup over the $1,000 it's supposed to cost, also a horrible value. The $550 RX 9070, even though that was the lower of the value proposition between these two cards, is still getting about a 50% markup, plus $278, with the cheapest being $828. So again, I don't recommend buying either of these cards, but the 9070 non-XT seems to be in a worse position than the RTX 5070 right now. And then the 9070 XT, which should be $600, is $940 plus $340, 56.7% markup. And yeah, I mean, I guess they're going for like a somewhat equivalent price to the 5070 Ti with that, which would almost seem like a competitive price between these two cards if either of these prices were competitive in the least. So I wasn't intending this to be another depressing video about GPU pricing, but that's kind of what it has turned out to be. I do have some potential hope, some silver linings to finish the video off with, and I am hoping that this is sort of a low point and things will start to improve from here. What is starkly evident, as I discussed on Tech News just over the weekend, is that NVIDIA is really focusing on its AI business. That's where they're allocating the lion's share of their TSMC yields. They make a lot more money from a TSMC wafer full of AI GPUs than they do from a TSMC wafer full of GPUs made for GeForce graphics cards. On the plus side though, there was some optimistic news this week from NVIDIA, which is that they're going to be producing Blackwell chips at TSMC's fab that they have just gotten up and running in Arizona. For US-based customers, that might mean chips produced at TSMC Arizona would not be subject to import tariffs, and that could help bring prices down. Likewise, the GPU add-in board partner Yeston said that RX 9070 supply should be stable from April. This is not coming directly from AMD, so we should take it with a grain of salt, but there is some reason for optimism there. And then I think the thing that will encourage NVIDIA most to output more gaming GPUs is competition from AMD and AMD gaining market share. And there are also reports this week that AMD is making some pretty big gains simply because people want to buy graphics cards. The 50 series is out of stock, and I guess maybe in Japan they had more RTX 9070s available to buy. So hopefully that's also encouragement for AMD to say, look, keep spitting out these GPUs, people are going to buy them up right now because the demand is there. So even though there's not a lot of reason for it, I'm going to continue to at least attempt to be optimistic about the future for GPUs, building gaming PCs, and hopefully not everyone is just going to decide to go and become a console gamer instead, because right now, I would not blame you in the least for making that choice. You'll get access to GTA 6 earlier that way as well. But that's all the time I have for this video, you guys. If you have any feedback for me for next month's installment, when hopefully, according to those rumors, things might get a little bit better, please leave those down in the comment section below. Also down in the video description, I'll post links to the articles I referenced and a link to my store at paulshardware.net, where you can help support my channel by getting yourself some awesome, high quality merchandise. Thank you guys once again for watching this video. Subscribe if you're not already so you can get notified when next month's installment goes live, and we'll see you all in the next video.